Judicial fraud alone is enough to send this man called government to life in prison. Fellow Nigerians, today I want to address you all on an issue that bothers me. This is an issue that is at the heart of most of our problems as a people. It has actually been elevated to a national sport, and most Nigerians are experts at this sporting game. This is a game that requires no skill other than your ability to speak or type. There are always millions of Nigerians playing at every given time against one opponent, the government. It is called the blame game. We are so good at blaming our government for everything, from the mundane to the most complex. We have blamed every government since independence, both civilian and military, and ultimately hated every government we have ever had. I decided to address this matter today because of a conversation I had over the weekend with one of my granddaughters. I had watched her riding her bicycle a little too fast down the winding part of the garden behind the presidential villa. As expected, she soon keeled over and started crying. As I rushed to pick her up, I heard her mutter, "This government can never get anything right." You can imagine my disbelief and amazement to hear my 7-year-old granddaughter already blaming government for a bicycle accident. I asked her what role the government had to play in her accident, and she says the path was not straight. I then asked her who the government is, and she looks at me with those lovable big eyes of hers and says, "You, Baba." As I deliberated on my response to her, it occurred to me that this was a national malady that had deeply eaten into the fabric of our nation like a cankerworm. If 7-year-olds already know to blame government for any and all issues, then government is in trouble. As I prepare to address the nation on this explosive issue, I am reminded that we live in interesting times and that whatever I say would be interpreted and misinterpreted a million ways. But this would never stop me from doing what I know is right. So please stay with me as I chart the course of my argument. First example, Dele, whose wife has left him, blames government for not giving him the kind of job needed to keep his wife. Second example, Amina is a lecturer whose former senator husband was killed by bandits and blames government for the insecurity in the country. Third example, Achadu is a policeman whose son died in a hospital due to a doctor's negligence, and he blames the government for this. Fourth example, Rekia leaves her husband because of domestic abuse and blames government because the police didn't protect her when she reported the matter to them. In the 4 true-life examples I have cited, Dele, Amina, Achadu, and Rekia are all inextricably linked to the government they blame. But what you don't know is that they have common ties that bind so deep. Dele was actually married to Rekia. She left him because of domestic abuse, but rather than address his personal demons, he blames government for the failure of his marriage. Rekia had reported a domestic abuse at the police station, and Achadu is the male chauvinist police officer who took a complaint but failed to act because he saw her as another troublesome woman who was not even willing to motivate him. Achadu's son died at the hands of a doctor who had no business being in the medical profession other than having an influential auntie called Amina, who was also a lecturer in his medical school. Amina's late husband was a 2-term senator and once chairman of the Senate Committee on Police Affairs. As chairman of this powerful committee, he was more interested in getting contracts from the Nigerian police for the supplies of guns and bullets than in advocating for police reforms. The bullets that killed him could be traced to the black market weapons racket that was going on at the police armory. All these people were more connected to the so-called government than they thought. So my question to you, my fellow Nigerians, is who is government? If you can help me identify who this criminal called government is, I assure you that as your president, I will ensure that he is immediately arrested and charged to court for all his crimes against Nigerians from all walks of life since independence. Does anyone know who his parents are, or if he has any known relatives? That's assuming he's even a male. Does anyone know what state, tribe, or community he or she is from? I need all the clues I can get from you. Who are the victims of this master criminal called government? Does anyone know any of his associates, what schools he attended, his age? I assume he must be quite old, seeing that he has been at this since independence. My dear Nigerians, I can assure you that even though my granddaughter has accused me of being government, I am not he. Maybe if we x-ray some of his recent crimes, we might be able to find a clue to his identity. He was said to be behind a ridiculous Supreme Court judgment on the Imo gubernatorial elections. Even though the judgment favored my party, I can never be a party to it. This judicial fraud alone is enough to send this man called government to life in prison. He was also linked to electoral fraud in our last elections, having worked with different political parties to undermine the political process. This benefited several parties, so this tells us he works with all the parties. He has also been linked to the Abuja Airport Highway that has claimed so many lives. This 34-kilometer highway is one of the most expensive in the world, both in material cost and human casualties. Mr. Government has been linked to sex for grade scandal in our tertiary institutions, the epileptic power supply in our country, the congestion in our port, the indiscriminate arrest of dissenting voices, the thousands of deaths from the decade-long war with Boko Haram, and now ISWAP, the herdsmen killing all over Nigeria, the lucrative kidnappings that occur daily in all our cities. Others are the Yahoo Boys industry, the One Chance Syndicate, the ongoing rift between my Chief of Staff and the National Security Advisor, my inability to change my service chiefs, the seeming lopsidedness in political appointments that appear to favor a particular region over the others, further exacerbated with the appointment few days ago of the new Director General of NIMASA, who I have been told is the father-in-law of one of my personal assistants. Whoa! It seems this criminal has his tentacles everywhere, but I have good news for you, my fellow Nigerians. As I listed the different crimes of this man called government, I believe I have been able to finally decode his identity. I noticed all his crimes had one thing in common: the human element. I also deduced that he is not God, so it is therefore impossible for him to be in multiple places at the same time. I also saw that he has worked with military governments, civilian governments, the PDP and the APC, which means he has multiple personalities, or he is multiple persons. I'm more inclined to agree with the latter. Let me explain some more. Hundreds of people were involved in the planning, design, award, execution, supervision and payment for the Abuja Airport Road project. Who spoke up when they saw design or execution flaws? A panel of Supreme Court judges from different backgrounds, tribes and religion sat on the Imo Gobar case that most of you have condemned. The judges all have distinct identities, and I'm sure none of them has the name government as his first or last name. Some have suggested that they were induced, which I cannot confirm or deny. But let's assume that's the case. Then it means some bankers were involved. It means some people provided the financing. If on the other hand, money didn't change hands and it was a case of the ruling party bullying the judges, then some person or persons must have been involved. I don't subscribe to this point of view because I expect anyone who has reasoned through the different court systems to become a judge of the Supreme Court is not a pushover. Rather than be bullied into ruling against their conscience, I expect they should resign rather than desecrate the hallowed chambers of the courts, which is the last hope of the common man. How did Boko Haram recruit members and their family, neighbors and friends did not know? How do they get their weapons and supplies? Some have suggested that the weapons we buy for our military somehow find its way to the hands of these people. What exactly does somehow mean? If that is the case, then it means that Nigerians like you and I intentionally committed treason by supplying weapons to the enemy. Who are these people? Surely someone must know them. I am inundated daily with tales of so-called Fulani headsmen with AK-47s watering our farmlands with human blood. How can a cattle header afford an AK-47? Those guns are not cheap. Who supplies them with the weapons? Surely someone must know. How do they move freely across Nigeria with guns when we have thousands of policemen manning our roadblocks and stations? Some have suggested that I personally instructed the police and military leadership not to arrest and prosecute the headers because they are Fulani. This is ridiculous. But for the purpose of this argument, let's assume they are right. This also means multiple people must have been involved in this secret meeting. Why didn't anyone put country first and blow the whistle? We all witnessed the recent impeachment of the American president and saw how courageous men and women spoke up in defense of country before president, not minding whose ox was gored. We cannot continue this charade of blaming an imaginary person called government for everything wrong with our society when we know who the real culprits are. I take responsibility for all my actions and my failures. Those who work with me should also take responsibility for their actions. Call them out or expose them for their actions or inactions, and don't let anyone hide under the cloak of the name government. Let us all be guided by God and our Constitution in whatsoever we do. Let us take the lonely road to betterment and understand that perfection is not our enemy. We must fail until we succeed, and succeed until we arrive at perfection's door. The circle of life gives us both, so let us learn from our failures and enjoy our successes. So back to my earlier question, who is government? You and I. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. God bless you all.